everything he's called us to do is about a being of service to the maximum. So it's not just, well, what can I do through, this one person to impact this other one person? No, it's what can I do through this one person to impact themselves, to impact, the next person they come into contact, and the next person that person comes in contact with, and the masses, right? And that's why we see here where it talks about like the seed that fell on the good soil represents those who truly hear and understand God's word and produce a harvest of 30, 60, or even 100 times as much as had been planted. Because whatever is put into you, you like the impact of what can come from when it's released will always be greater. Will always be greater, no matter what has been planted in you. When that is shared externally, when that is voiced, when that is given life, right? God spoke and there was life. You can speak and there will be life. And as long as what you're speaking is in alignment with the Spirit's leading in your life, you can trust that it will produce a harvest of 30, 60, or even 100 times more than that initial seed that had been planted. So today I just want to encourage you, all right, to encourage you as I encourage myself on this journey, remembering that I am a child of God. That means I am an inheritor of this kingdom. Right? You are a child of God. You are an inheritor of this kingdom. You are called to so much more. But that calling, as we've spoken about in past episodes, that calling first requires you to hear. And to hear, you've got to be listening. Right? And then once you listen and hear, you've got to respond. And that response is not a surface level, here's what I think I need to do, but it's a response to that direct inkling. And that is always going to be requiring faith. Why? Because in the kingdom, faith is currency, right? In the world, money is currency. In the kingdom, faith is currency. And so that's why, I'm so excited to be here and to be obedient by, just creating these, little podcast audio conversations, whatever you want to call it, of just me sharing my thoughts and trusting that there's something of service, and doing that as a way of normalizing, well, one, just like sharing, here's what's on my heart, what's on my mind, what I'm learning, as a way of trusting that there's something of value it can offer you. Also, just normalizing this process of doing things messy, right? Of not everything. So often we think, oh, well, in order for it to be of value and for people to really like it, it's got to be a certain way. No, reject that. And most of us, we know that statement of not everything has to be a certain way for it to be, deemed valuable or okay. We know that in theory, but then there's a part of us that doesn't always fully want to believe that, because we still think we need to prove our righteousness. But again, that's why it's this journey of leading whole and recognizing what does it really take for me? What's that inner work? What are the deep roots that take time to practice, to plant, to really, get down and deep, so that when the winds come, my tree is not going to fall over, right? When the sun comes, my sprout is not going to wither. What are those roots that need to be planted in order to fully believe that who I am, as I am right now, is complete, whole, and lacking nothing, right? And I ask you that, what are those things that you need to be planting now? I mean, the seed's already been planted, I'm sure, right? If you're even listening to this, it's because there's already been a seed planted in your life that says, I'm hungry to grow. I'm hungry to heal. I'm hungry to learn, right? Do not let that seed fall on shallow soil. right? Do not let that hunger just come to a place where it's, oh, yes, I'm encouraged and I'm fed for a little bit. I'm hungry. And now, let me go off. And then I'll come back again and I'll just kind of have this exchange, right? This transactional relationship with food. I'm hungry, I eat. I'm hungry, I eat. I'm hungry, I eat. Instead, think about what would it look like to have food in abundance, right? 30, 60, or even 100 times more than you imagined. That's what God desires for us all. Not to be hungry and to keep coming to him when we hunger, not to be hungry and to keep dipping into, what can I do to kind of quench that, but to always just be in this place of overflow, to always be in this place of awe, to always be in this place of security and peace, right? Because when we think about the trees and the plants that have the deepest of roots, they are the ones that can weather the most. The storms come, the rain, the hails, heck, even fires will come that tear down complete forests. And you see, there are many trees that will still rebuild themselves when they have really deep roots. That's what this journey is about recognizing that we are more than our current bodies. This is what we have. But there are going to be different things that happen in life that come to etch at the body, that come to tear it down, to break it apart, to make it not work as well as it could. As long as we have deep roots, we will always survive those things. And we will survive them in a way that allows us to thrive in the aftermath of things that seem devastating. And that's kind of the last thing that I want to end on here as well, is because then in verse 24, we go on to look at the parable, the wheat and weeds. And Jesus says, it says, here's another story that Jesus told. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. But that night, as the workers slept, his enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat, then slipped away. When the crop began to grow and produce grain, the weeds also grew. The farmer's workers went to him and said, "Sir, the field where you planted that good seed is full of weeds. Where did they come from?" "An enemy has done this," the farmer exclaimed. "Should we pull out the weeds?" they asked. "No," he replied. "You'll uproot the wheat if you do. Let both grow together until harvest. Then I will tell the harvesters to sort out the weeds, tie them into bundles, and burn them, and to put the wheat in the barn." I thought this was a powerful kind of follow-up to the parable of the seeds, because we're still looking at plants, right? And we did already touch on environment a little bit, and how when there's thorns and there's different things in our environment, it can choke us out. And that's true. But look at this example, right? So our environment can choke us out, which is very true. And we've got to be very mindful and aware of our environments, mentally and physically. As we're aware, we also want to discern, when is this an environment that I need to leave because it is going to choke me out, right? That's the thorns, right? That's the thorns that we saw. They choked out the tender plants. The plants were too tender. But then also, when are we in environments that might not look great, but we still need to stay? Like this parable of the weeds and the wheat. They grew alongside one another. When the crop began to grow and produce grain, the weeds grew also. And I think we can look at this in multiple ways. The first way that stood out for me was about recognizing that basically that sometimes we need the weeds to grow alongside us, right? And that if we were to uproot some of the weeds in our life, some of the environmental things that feel really toxic to us, or maybe not even they feel toxic, but like weeds are just unpleasant. They weren't actually damaging the grain from growing to the point of being harvested, right? And maybe this is its own lesson, so maybe I should slice this into another, but we'll see what happens. But I think what's interesting is that we look at a weed, we know weeds are pervasive, we know that they're pests. So sometimes you're going to be in environments where you have to look around and you assess, is this an environment that is going to choke me out? And I have, got to switch it up, right? I've got to take it on myself to say, I've got to leave this environment. It is not conducive to me growing because it is actually choking me, stifling me. Or is this an environment where this is not pleasant, I don't like this, it's annoying, it's pervasive, it feels like, it's not helpful, but if I were to pull this out, right, it says, wait, you can't. Where does it say it? They said, should we pull out the weeds? He said, no, if you pull them out, you'll uproot the wheat too. Sometimes when we think about our environments, and I think this is where, I don't know, I'm speaking out loud right now, so I need to think a little bit maybe deeper before I do to say that. But some of our challenges are so intertwined with who we are. And even though we know they are not healthy for us, we haven't yet matured to a space where we can handle departing from them, because our identity is so wrapped up in them that if we were to depart, we would actually unravel in a way that would be detrimental. And so actually it benefits us to stay in those environments that might not be like, wow, this is an amazing environment, but it's not one where we're choked out, right? We're still able to grow, we're still able to develop. But here's the key. At some point, the weed does need to be removed. And what this says is, let them both grow together until the harvest. So there will be a point in your life as you're going on your journey, as long as you continue to grow and to learn from everything around you, right? You will hit a point where you're ready to be harvested. Right. And what I look at that is like when God says, okay, you've learned what I needed you to learn in this season. You've grown, you've healed in the way that allows you to now be in a place where you are ready to let go of that identity. And when you let go of it, you are going to be freed and liberated rather than shackled in this new, place of, wait, but who am I then without this identity? Because again, our journeys are our own, and that means like our healing is going to take different times, and we're not all going to be ready for the same thing at the same time. And what took Susie 5 minutes to get over might take John 10 years to get over. And we've got to allow time for our process to give it the space that it needs. And so I say all that just to remind us that environment is key, but it's about like being mindful that the environment is important. And in that mindfulness, this is where it comes back to your own listening, reflection, discernment of, okay, what is my environment doing? And is this an environment I need to leave because it's choking, or is this an environment that I need to grow alongside until I am at that point? And then once you're at that point, that's when you leave, right? And again, it's not of your own strength, right? To be harvested required somebody else to come in, right? And so that's, again, I think about a willingness and a readiness to say, okay, God, I've been doing this work. I know I've been, maybe dipping one toe in, then one toe out, I've been like, going back and forth. I've been here, but I want to go to the next level. because I feel like you're calling me to the next level. I've put in the work. I've gone through a lot, and I'm at a place now where I'm ready to step away from this. But I cannot do it on my own, right? You can't. That's why it's a time of harvesting. Somebody else comes to harvest. And so we can look at that as like God coming and saying, okay, like this is where surrender comes in, right? Where you have to surrender and say, God, I can't do this in and of myself. Take me, use me, show me what's next. And God will. And oftentimes he will also bring along people, right? Because God loves to use people to be blessings to other people. And again, that's the only reason God blesses you. The main reason, right? I mean, well, ultimately all of it's for his glory, but it's like God blesses us in order for us to be blessings towards others, right? Like everything is about impact, everything, maximum impact. And so, when I know this is, I've been speaking for some time. My mind's going all over right now. But I guess what I want to say to you is like so many things. One is just give yourself grace for where you're at. Understand also that if you're in a place where you're like, okay, I am, I've been growing with the weeds and now it's time to be harvested. I'm surrendered. That's really the beginning, right? That place of surrender is really the beginning, right? Because what happens with wheat once it's harvested? Only once it's harvested do we begin to use it. And only once it's used does it begin to maximize its value, right? As the seed, it's not really of service and of value to many people. As it grows, again, it's not really of value or of use. Once it's harvested and in the barn, okay, it's got the potential, but it's not about it just staying in the barn, right? And I think sometimes we put a lot of energy on that too. We think, oh yeah, okay, now I'm at the place, I'm surrendered, God, use me. And then we get separated from the weeds. And then we're like, okay, but what, like, how come like nothing's really happening? Because you're sitting in the barn. You're the harvested wheat sitting in the barn. It's not meant just to be harvested for the sake of separation, right? Like God's called you to be set apart, not to be alone and in isolation in some barn, but to be set apart so that you can show people a new, a new avenue for what life could be like. So that you can bless people and nourish them and nurture them and provide them sustenance to thrive. And that's what grain does, right? Grain gets taken and ground, turned into flour, made into bread, eaten and used as energy in bodies. That energy then allows people to show up in service and in laughter and in love, right? And so if we look at our lives as, relating to all of this, if we are that seed, right? And we want to be planted in a way that allows us to have the maximum input or the maximum output, the maximum impact in the world, then we've got to be focused on deepening our roots. And that's what I'm here for. As I said, that's what my journey's been about, just personally. And that's what I'm excited to just start sharing more and more of, is just inviting you into some of my, journey and my thoughts via this space. But also, like, that's what I do in my service, right? In like this calling placed on my life for myself, in like how it's taken shape externally with Women of Purpose and Power, right? The larger community that I've been building. That's the environment that's really going to help people develop deep roots, develop a practice, right? So if you are listening and you're like, man, I'm this seed and I recognize, like, I know I have so much fruit to give, but I haven't really produced much. Examine, well, where are you? Are you, in shallow soil? Are you just like scattered on the footpath and birds are eating you? Are you in an environment with thorns where you're getting choked out? Or are you in fertile soil? Fertile soil is soil that develops deep roots. Deep roots means that you're not just having these, oh yes, I feel, encouraged every once in a while, but it's sustaining a deep belief in the truth of who you are and what you have the power to do, right? It's deepening in your relationship, your connection to God, creator, source. It's operating from the fullness of your unique purpose and living out that power to impact. And it's a power that is readily available to all of us because it's a power of the Spirit that moves in and through us. But we have got to be willing, right? So if you've identified you're anywhere but fertile soil right now, or you want even more, nourishing soil, I invite you to join, the community of women that I feel so honored to be gathered with, right? Because we thrive when more women who are like-hearted in the commitment to themselves, to God, to the world, right? We thrive when there's more of us who have made this commitment to be radically different, to go against the grain, to pursue, our purpose and power to its fullest, to tap into realms of the spirit rather than just staying in the realm of the physical. And so I'd love to be of support to your journey by walking with you and inviting you to deepen. So if that sounds of interest, please, continue to follow along here. That's step number 1, but go to equese.com. Go to equese.com, sign up for our newsletter, be a part of the larger community of, we've got a variety of different ways that you can engage. The main way, if you really want to be developing depth and consistency, is to join our community of practice called Aligned and Anchored, where you sign up for a year-long commitment to yourself, to the woman that you are becoming, by committing to say, hey, every month I am going to show up and hold space for myself, right? And we hold the space together. And it's space for us to celebrate ourselves, to cry, to laugh, to reflect, to dig, to process, to normalize, the beauty of how messy and complex and simple and beautiful this process is, right? And to build those deep roots and to remind ourselves that, hey, while we're building these roots, there's going to be voices that come to say, well, you haven't really done anything. Wow, what have you done with your life? Like, you can't show this new job. You can't show this new, income. You can't show this new car, whatever. You're a failure. No, we're there to remind us, no, the real work. Like, look at how you've transformed. Look how much more forgiving you are. Look how much more open you are. Look how much more free you are. Look how much more authentic you are. These are the things that we don't often celebrate in the world as like success. But let me tell you, these are the things that keep most people imprisoned. They can have, and people do all the time. You can look to even some of the most, well-known people, and they're struggling internally. And they're well-known because they've achieved, with my air quotes, some type of, worldly success. They've gotten all the checked off all the boxes of what the world says we need to be successful. They've elevated those goals, but they forgot that what really matters is like, are you living a life that's in integrity to who you are? Are you able to, make decisions that really feel good to what you need and deserve and desire? Or are you making decisions that are based on somebody else's ideal for your life? Are you able to forgive the people that have hurt you? Or do you walk around with all these grudges that are just dark? Do you, relive time and time again things that people have said to you, or have you surrendered them? Right? Developing these deeper elements, or, these are really like characteristics of God, right? These deeper elements on the journey that we develop by consistently showing up again and again to the journey. Like, these are what provide you a sense of healing and inner reconciliation, and thus freedom. And that is priceless, right? Like, that's the deep roots that, sure, it might not look like much on the outside, but we're here to remind you, hey, girl, you are setting yourself up for miracles upon miracles. And don't worry about when are they coming? How do I see them? When will it look like? No, surrender to that and you will be amazed beyond measure, right? Because God's plans for us are even greater than what we have imagined or could even possibly imagine, dream of, or fathom for ourselves. So remember that today. And join me in Aligned and Anchored, right? Join me and the other powerhouse women of faith who are saying, I know I'm called to make a lasting impact in the world. And the way that I do that is by joining in an environment with other women who have radically committed to becoming their truest and highest version of self, so that we can do this work together, this work of giving ourselves back to ourselves, of sourcing our own needs and connecting to something so much bigger than us. So, Akwese.com, that's AKWESE, to find more information on Aligned and Anchored, and to join or to follow along in any other way. We have some other events that you can join that are one-off events, and then we also have some deeper elements of programs and retreats that you can dive into as well. If you don't just want that monthly touch point, but you want to be working together, hand in hand more intimately, to say, yo, like, let's get into this soil. Let's really let's look at even the harvest and like what needs to happen after that time of, hey, I've surrendered, now what? Now what, God? Now is when I need other doors to open, other people to step into my life in order to help me turn this thing that I am, this wheat, this grain, into something that can take on multiple forms that then become blessing to everyone around me and beyond, right? Turning that grain into food, turning that grain into, bread, turning that grain into whatever, it needs to be, into a basket. I don't know. Right? So many different uses for animals, for cows, for transport, for eating, all sorts of things. So I'm going to end things here, trusting that you have been fed, and hoping to get to connect with you more intimately as part of our global sisterhood for women of purpose and power. So see you on the inside. Bye.